Sometimes you just have to take matters into your own hands. That's exactly what Dawn Strachan did. With her primary school-age daughter and son facing learning challenges and unable to muster support for them from her local school system, Dawn realized that she would need to find her own solution. So she leaned into her university training in early learning development and education and created her own methods for helping them with math, spelling, and reading. Dawn realized two key fundamentals. Learning needed to be fun in order to keep the student engaged in the lesson, and each child learns differently, so lessons needed to be modified to the specific needs of the student. Her success tutoring her own children caught the attention of other parents who, it turns out, had children who faced similar challenges, and thus began a small sideline tutoring business. That business is now 11 years old, and Dawn now has a team of over 10 tutors who she has trained in her methodology. She's also started a franchise business so that parents in other cities or even other countries can help their children overcome obstacles that might be holding them back in their schoolwork. Recognizing the helplessness and frustration that parents can feel when their children are struggling in school, Dawn started a Facebook membership group where parents can find advice and support from her as well as from other group members. Today, Dawn joins us here on a seat at the table to share her journey and tell us more about how she built Clara James Tutoring. Dawn, thank you so much for joining us here today.
My background started in childcare and education 22 years ago, just before my youngest was born. And long story short, I did my degree as a mature student after the kids were born. And because I had 3 young children, it had to be something that worked alongside them. And it started as a diploma in preschool practice. And then alongside doing my degree, I worked in a mainstream school, and I also worked in the base, which was for children who had profound autism and couldn't cope in mainstream schools. But the children I worked with in the mainstream class, there were 4 of them in there which had ADHD. And what I learned from very early on was basically that every child is different. Every child needs to be treated as an individual. I also thought that as my oldest daughter got older, I thought she might be mildly dyslexic. And I approached the school and said to her what were their thoughts on it. And this is going back nearly 20 years. And their attitude was basically, well, dyslexia is an excuse for laziness. We can't see that there's a problem. And at that time, I didn't have the confidence to kind of like fight my corner. So I thought, okay, well, if they won't help, I'll do what I can to help them myself. So alongside my degree, I started learning what I could about different learning styles and things. Moving the clock forward many years, I'd worked in various different settings by that stage. But what I'd learned was that, like I say, every child is an individual, but if we're relaxed, we're more likely to learn. But also one of the things I'd learned that if we do one thing and we keep doing it, so if I give you a worksheet, for example, to do, and then another worksheet on the same subject, all that's happening is you're creating one memory, and with each new worksheet, you're making that memory stronger. So if you've got some form of different learning style, that means your brain doesn't think kind of like in a linear fashion. Your brain isn't necessarily going to find that one memory. So if we do a variety of different resources, we're going to create multiple memories so that when we're setting a test and we're panicking, or if our brain just isn't thinking kind of like in that linear straight line, it's got different places to go to where it can find the information that it needs. So that was something that was key to what I'd learned. And then alongside that, the fact that if we are relaxed, we're more likely to enjoy ourselves. And if we're enjoying ourselves, we're more likely to want to participate. And also the fact that I've been working with children with different forms of learning difficulties and children in early years. So everything that I'd been learning and experiencing was all about enjoyment and interaction. So I just presumed that life has moved on from how it was when I was at school. And this is how everyone teaches now. So in my naivety, I set up the tutoring business with kind of like, well, as a parent, what would I expect from a tutor? And this is obviously how children learn. So I wrote down my experience and I wrote down that this is how we would do things. And evidently, that isn't how most tutors do it. Most tutors still use predominantly worksheets. And so because we were doing something slightly different and tailoring it off towards children with different learning styles, it seemed to pick up. And so within 6 months, there was more work than I could handle by myself.
Wow.
So within 6 months, I left my full-time job to just focus on tutoring. Within 18 months, there was more work than I could handle by myself. And so it's just kind of like, really, it's just grown from my naivety because that's how I presumed that everyone did things. And from what I perceived to be the norm, because that was what I'd been experiencing over the previous 10, 12 years while I'd been working in different settings, working in various different educational settings.
That's so impressive. I really like the fact that you saw a problem and you set out to tackle it, and you weren't concerned about doing things by the book, so to speak. You sought out more with the end goal in mind. How do I solve this problem for children who are struggling to learn?
Exactly. And the thing was, and it's still something that I hold firm now, is the fact that if someone rings and asks for support, they're not someone that we need to look at just to kind of like boost our numbers. Someone's ringing because their child's got a problem. And so basically, what can I do to help you? Whether you decide that we're the right tutors for you or not makes no difference. If I can like have a conversation with you here and now that can give you some advice, then and Rich is going to help you. I mean, long term, that's been great for the business because by giving that angle, it has kind of like helped people to trust us and like us from the outset. We don't come across as just being kind of like here for your money, and then once we've got your money, we'll help you. It's more like treating people as individuals because that has basically been the foundations of the business. Is we are all individuals. So how how does that individual need the support?
Such an important point of view, and I really applaud that because you're right. We've sort of lost that over the years. We've come through maybe at least 2 decades, if not more, where it's always been monetization first and service, quality, customer support, anything else is pushed as far away as possible. Only tackle that if you absolutely have no way out. So I like the fact, yeah, that you've put that the child or their parents first, and you just say to yourself, I'm not going to just turn somebody away and leave them stranded or only deal with them if they're going to buy my service. So I think that's really good. I think that creates that very high quality and more focused approach. I think that's great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, I'm sure along the way, building this business, which is a lot bigger than you will ever admit to, Dawn, because I know you're very modest. But what have been some of the biggest challenge, or maybe some of the biggest challenges?
I was thinking about this, and I think there's probably been three. The
Okay.
first one was not long after well, like I say, about 18 months after I started, there was far too much work that I could cope with myself. So what I did was I put it out there that I was looking for support from other tutors, but I didn't actually employ these tutors. If, for example, you said you tutored media or something, and someone got in touch with me and said they were looking for a tutor for their daughter or son that was studying media, I wouldn't necessarily know anything about the way you were doing it because, like I say, I was quite naive. I just presumed everyone did the things in the same way. I'd kind of, oh, Jane does that. I'll give you her contact details. And at this time, my son was doing his A levels, and this tutor that I'd been recommending to others said that he also supported economics, and Jamie had missed something in the lesson at school but needed the information for an upcoming test. So I got in touch with this bloke and said, look, can you just spend an hour with Jamie going over this subject, whatever it was? And he said, yep, that's fine. That was £50 an hour. This is about 8 years ago, so this is quite a substantial amount back then, plus transport. So, okay, what we're going to get is obviously going to be good. And he turned up and he'd got a pen in his hand. His shirt was unbuttoned virtually down to his belly button.
Oh
And he
my
just looked
gosh.
like he turned up for kind of like a party or something with a pen. And when he got there, he just sat down with Jamie and said, right, okay, what would you like to talk about? And Jamie kind of said it was this and said, okay, well, what do you know about that? And Jamie said, well, nothing. I missed the lesson, so that's basically why you're here. And the following hour was literally just this chap trying to prize out of Jamie what he knew about the subject, but the answer was literally nothing because he'd missed a lesson. So at the end of the hour, he left. I was £50 poorer. Jamie was none the riser. And as a
Wow.
parent, I was annoyed, but I'd also been recommending this person to other people. And my thoughts were if I've been recommending him and that's how he does things, people are going to think that how that's what I deem to be acceptable and how I go about doing it. And when I said to the bloke about it, he can't, well, no one's ever complained about it before. Well, I feel like complaining about it now. But
Yes,
so I basically stopped recommending anyone else. There was only one bloke that I continued recommending, and he was fantastic. I went back to trying to solve and do everything myself, and that doesn't work. You can't do everything yourself. And it
true.
was only when Jamie finished his A levels that I kind of like thought like, he took a one-way ticket then to Australia. My oldest daughter had already left home. My youngest daughter was only 2 years younger than Jay, so it wasn't going to be long till she left. So I thought, well, look, Dawn, you can't work 7 days a week. You can't continue doing everything yourself. And so that's when I then started to employ tutors to work with me so that I knew that I could basically say, look, this is how we do things. If you don't want to do it this way, then this isn't the job for you. And again, not long after I started, I was doing my ironing, watching the TV, and this bloke phoned up and he was kind of like, "Oh, I've got your details from the internet, from your website, and what you're doing we think is great. We'd like to offer you a front page thing on Google." Oh, this is good. He obviously thinks what I'm doing is fantastic, and my confidence, which has always been as a very low, the fact that someone was kind of like praising me, I kind of like swallowed it wholeheartedly. Anyway, he got this amazing special offer. Did I want to sign up? Yep. I didn't read the bottom print. My mistake, which I have learned from, obviously. But about a year later, I got a phone call saying, well, because you haven't cancelled this contract, you now owe us, I can't remember how much it was, but it was several £1,000s.
Wow.
And I newly divorced, I can say, look, I can't afford to pay that right now. And so I said, what I can do is give you a small amount on my credit card and then just pay you the rest in installments, if that's okay. So he said, well, give me your credit card details and I'll check with my boss that that's okay. So did as I was asked. Barclays, while I was on hold, or he put the phone down from there, Barclays phoned and kind of like said, someone's taken an installment from your card. Is that okay? So presuming that was the deposit that I just allowed. Anyway, what I didn't realize they were doing was taking multiples of this amount. And in the end, they took over 13 grand from my credit card. And it
Oh
turned out
no.
by not reading the small print, I'd landed hook, line, and sinker for a scam. So I
Oh
learned
my
a lot from
God.
that lesson. But yeah, just my naivety and the fact that I didn't realize things like this went on at the time, and the fact that he seems such a nice guy. And I just fell for it. Someone paid me compliments and said, oh, wow, I'm flattered. Thank you.
Well, I mean, that's the kind of disaster that happens to so many people. I think we've all been there in one degree or another, maybe not as dire as what you faced. So I think it's good that you brought that up because so many people fall victim to that. That's why these scams continue. So after that horrific situation, how did you turn things around?
Took a while, but I basically went through small claims court, and in the end, I did get my money back because they had, as part of this conversation, promised to do me a website, and they never produced that website. It took about 18 months, but I did get the back. But the business then basically, after Jamie left and I started employing tutors, it went from one to two. And I found that I've always been quite particular about the people that I employed because I've worked so hard to build up our reputation that I now know that not everyone has the same attitude to how we learn. So I'm very, very particular about who I will take on. But because I've now got some fantastic people working with me. And whenever someone gets in touch and says, can you recommend? I can go, yes, I've got this fantastic lady that or gentleman that works with me. And I can recommend them with full confidence. But because they are so fantastic, it's meant that they've then started working with people. And so the word has just spread and spread and spread. And so because I am now so careful, it means that the reputation has gone from being just me, myself, and I
Right.
to quite a big team. And yeah, it's just kind of like it's just been small and steady along the way. It's not been any one big thing that I can think of that I've done. It's just been kind of like small incremental steps which have just grown it. And it's taken time and effort, but we've got there, or we're getting there in the end.
Well, I think that's a really important point that you bring up because so often, especially nowadays, we're sold on this overnight success, right? You have so many
Mm.
gurus out there. most recently on the internet, but even before the internet, you always had people who were selling a get rich quick scheme. And yet when you look at real success by real people, it's always that step by step incremental improvement, learning from mistakes, and having the tenacity, right, to hang in there as you have. So I think it's so impressive that you've gone through these things and you've come out the other end with a really successful business.
Thank you. Thank you. Although part of it has also been the fact I didn't have the confidence to say, I can't do this, hands up. It's kind of been a case of, okay, you can't back out now, you're in too far. Just keep going, see what happens.
We're going to take a quick break now, and then we'll be right back.
We were hiring when we were making 50 to 100K monthly losses.
And why? Welcome to episode 1.
I can't think of a single founder who's been around for a decent amount of time in business who hasn't had their tunnel of year. This was that year. We're going to be okay, yeah, Sheree. Some are going to hear this and think, you TDP. But hear me out. You only have to do the math to understand that very soon we were $500,000 down.
Well, that's often what you need, right, to get to the other side, is, as they say, to have your back to the river. Yeah. So I think that the fact that you faced these problems and you found a way out, I mean, not just of the fraudulent Google salesman, but also of being able to address the problems in the business of saying, well, hiring these tutors and letting them do their own thing, you realized you needed to have quality standards and set up a framework for how things were done within the Clara James tutoring method, right? As opposed to just letting everybody sort of do their own thing. So I think that that's a really key takeaway.
Yeah, and the thing is, because we now have systems in place and I can kind of like say that, look, this is how we do things. This is, you have to do this, and this sort of thing. It's given us kind of like quite a strong framework. And it also means that if I recommend this person as a tutor or that person as a tutor, I know that regardless of which person I recommend suitable to the needs of the individual child, they're going to get because it can't be a perfect tick list because every child is different. It could be that one lad I used to work with, he liked to have kind of like past exam papers because he was on the autistic spectrum, but he liked to know exactly what to expect in the next lesson. So he just wanted that repetition of past paper, past paper, past paper. That's fine. But the next child you might work with might want the variety in the different games and things like that. But I know that whichever tutor I recommend, they will kind of like tick the boxes of taking your shoes off as you go into someone's house and the little things like that. But at the same time, they will also adapt everything so that it suits the needs of that individual child that they're working with, whether it's someone that wants the variety of different resources or whether it's someone that likes the kind of like routine and knows exactly what to expect when you turn up at 5 o'clock on Friday sort of thing.
I like the way you've created a system where you have a methodology and a system, and yet it has an element of flexibility so that on the one hand, you have that quality control side, but on the other hand, you are able to do, in a sense, what's foundational in your methodology, which is to customize it for each child, to adapt it to their educational needs. So I think that's quite clever, actually.
The thing was, because a few years ago, someone mentioned the idea of franchising, and I always thought that franchising meant that you had to kind of like follow certain steps, a bit like if you go into McDonald's, you know that you're going to get 3 bits of gherkin in your Big Mac or whatever.
Right.
And I couldn't see how you could do that for something like tutoring when every child that you work with is different. But actually, like you say, because we have kind of like got a structure and then it's just slightly deviating from that key structure to adapt it to the needs of the individual child. So your structure stays the same throughout. As very often it's been kind of like the little things which make such a big difference. And so they're always in place. They don't deviate. But the fact that this child likes this child likes that, we do have the flexibility from that point on to be able to cater for the needs of everybody.
I think that's really, it's such a great way of being able to reimagine the concept of a franchise, because as you were saying, we always think of a franchise as a fixed process. And in certain industries, many industries, you need to have that, right? Certainly the food industry is critical because you not only have quality standards, you also have health standards and a tremendous amount of legal codes around it, depending upon what jurisdiction you're in and so forth. So there is a little bit more, I don't know what you'd call it, but you don't necessarily have that flexibility. But I think in something like what you're doing, which is teaching individual children on a one-by-one basis, then it's interesting that you were able to see within a framework an opportunity to add that customization, that personalization, and so forth. I think that's really, it's really laudable to be able to have that vision and then to be able to execute on it. Because a lot of times people have an idea, me too, and then you can't think about how to bring it forward into reality.
Yeah, again, it's just been kind of like small steps over time. I mean, the franchise was originally supposed to start a couple of years ago, but then we went into lockdown, so it hasn't actually come to fruition. But the goal is that 2023 will be the year that the business starts to kind of like take on board franchisees. So that's kind of like the big step going forward, that and build up the membership group that we've recently started. So that's the goal.
Yeah, so tell me about the membership group.
Okay. The membership group is basically for parents of primary age children predominantly who aren't sure that actually tutoring is financially the right step or even just the right step for their child, because it's a big commitment to have someone turn up at your house every week, every fortnight, or whatever it is that they're wanting. So the membership group is basically just, if we were to come to your house and tutor your child, these are the resources that we would have available. So each month there's a new bundle of resources for a different topic uploaded. So it might be, so for example, last month it was one of the times tables and the different games that we would play for that. The month previously, I think it was homophones. Another month there was numbers and things like that. So there's kind of like bundles of different resources associated to different topics. And then there's also a Facebook group where you can ask general questions. And then each month there's a live Q&A, so that if there's something specific that your child's struggling with, then that's your opportunity to kind of like ask and we'll answer it for you. But it's free for those that we tutor, or the tutors themselves, obviously. But it's about £12 in English money a month for families to join. But couple of months ago we lost our dog, and so she was a rescue dog, so £2.50 out of each monthly membership will go to supporting the dog rescue charity that rescued Snow. So it's kind of like my way of giving back and kind of like saying thank you for saving her and giving us the years of love that we had from her.
Oh, that's so lovely. And it was really touching, I think, to see that you're not only supporting children to be able to learn and overcome some of the tremendous stresses that a child would face when they're struggling in school and feel like they're falling behind and they can't keep up with their schoolmates. But the fact that you're also trying to support animals, I think touches my heart for sure. I'm an animal lover. And I think a lot of people will see that you really are doing a lot for the community through the business that you've built. Now, where can people get in touch with you? How can people connect with you and how can they find Clara James Tutoring?
Probably you can find us on Facebook. You can email me at info@clarajamestutoring.co.uk, or you'll also find us on our website, which is clarajamestutoring.co.uk.
Okay, well, I'm going to put all of those links in the show notes. And I really think that for people who have school-age children who are struggling with one subject or another, the opportunity to have tutoring and get them past some of these hurdles is really critical in building their self-esteem and in helping them just in their entire future. Because once you start to fall behind, it becomes increasingly difficult to catch up. So to be able to have the support that comes from tutoring like what you're doing, I think is just game-changing.
Thank you. Thank you. It means a lot. Thank you.
Well, thank you for joining us here. It's really been a pleasure, Dawn.
Thank you for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
And
Thanks, Jane.
wish you continued success.
Thank you. And likewise. Thank you.